The bus stop bench is cold, smelling of rain and oxidized steel. WYRMSCALE sits with her hands folded over a leather satchel, watching the suburban intersection. Behind the plexiglass advertisement for a local supermarket, the horizon has vanished. A wall of dark, churning water stands perfectly vertical against the gray sky, rising miles into the atmosphere. It does not move forward or break. It simply occupies the space where the distant skyline should be, silent and impossibly dense, pulsing with the deep, rhythmic amber light. A droplet of moisture strikes the pavement, heavy as a lead shot, shattering into a spray that smells of ozone and ancient silt. WYRMSCALE leans forward, her eyes tracking the way the light refracts through the wall. Fish impossible and scale and translucent as blown glass drift through the liquid barrier, their long, ribbon-like fins trailing behind them like silk. They are trapped in the pressure, held in place by a physics that refuses to allow the ocean to spill over into the quiet, asphalted street. The bus arrives, its brakes screeching a high-pitched protest that shatters the unnatural silence. The driver does not look at the wall. He stares fixedly at the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the black rubber. As the doors hiss open, a structural support beam of the nearby shopping mall groans, metal fatiguing under the sheer atmospheric weight of the wall. Glass windows across the street buckle inward, not from wind, but from the sudden, terrifying shift in barometric pressure that turns the air thick enough to swim through. Traffic lights flicker, cycling through red and green in a frantic, stuttering rhythm before blowing out in a shower of sparks. WYRMSCALE stands, her movements fluid and unhurried despite the tremor running through the earth. A sedan parked nearby is slowly crushed, its roof caving in as the gravity near the wall intensifies. The pavement beneath the bus stop begins to crack, spiderwebbing outward in perfect, concentric circles. People inside the vehicle remain motionless, staring at their laps, refusing to acknowledge the encroaching, liquid horizon. WYRMSCALE adjusts the strap of her satchel, smoothing the fabric of her coat. She does not run. She does not look for an exit, nor does she join the few pedestrians who have begun to scream. Instead, she pulls a small, metallic compass from her pocket, watching the needle spin wildly before it locks toward the center of the wall. Her expression is a mask of practiced indifference, a stillness that borders on the predatory, as if she has been waiting for the exact moment the world began to lose its shape. The streetlights hum with a low, vibrating frequency that rattles the teeth. WYRMSCALE checks her wristwatch, noting that the time has stopped entirely. The second hand twitches against the minute mark, unable to advance. She turns away from the wall, observing a stray dog cowering under the bench, its tail tucked tight. She reaches down, offering a small piece of dried meat from her pocket, her fingers steady. The dog accepts the offering, its whimpering silenced by the same heavy, oppressive weight that governs the water. She studies the geometry of the wreckage. The way the buildings lean toward the wall suggests a magnetic pull, a drag on the very iron within the concrete. WYRMSCALE catalogs the pattern of the debris, the way glass shards orient themselves toward the north, aligning with the invisible currents swirling within the vertical sea. She is not merely watching the disaster, she is measuring the divergence, noting the precise angle at which the reality of this neighborhood is being peeled away from the bedrock of the planet. She unlatches the satchel, revealing a series of etched, lead-lined vials nestled in velvet. Each one contains a sediment of shimmering, iridescent sand gathered from previous incursions. WYRMSCALE unscrews the cap of the first vial, letting a single grain fall onto the cracked asphalt. As the grain touches the ground, the air around it turns frigid, and the pressure momentarily stabilizes, creating a pocket of calm space. She has brought the correct solvent for this specific manifestation, a precaution taken long before the sky turned to water. WYRMSCALE reaches into her satchel, withdrawing a weathered schematic drawn on synthetic vellum that does not crinkle in the humid air. The lines depict the parking lot not as it appears now, but as a grid of ley lines waiting for a specific resonance. She had studied these coordinates 3 years prior, during the incident in the Salt Flats, mapping the way the architecture would eventually fold. This was not a random rupture. It was a scheduled convergence she had spent half a decade anticipating. The solvent does more than stabilize the air. It reveals the foundation of the tower as a hollow shell, a decoy designed to anchor the reality bleed. WYRMSCALE realizes that the tower vanishing into the clouds is not the source of the rupture, but a lightning rod meant to draw the instability away from the city's center. Her plan was never to stop the phenomenon, but to guide it along the path she had etched into the pavement months ago, ensuring the collapse follows a predictable geometry. As the tower's upper stories dissolve into a vaporous gray, the pressure drops again, causing the parked vehicles to groan as their metal frames begin to liquefy. WYRMSCALE stands in the center of her protected circle, watching as the structural integrity of the entire neighborhood begins to fail. The cost of her intervention has shifted. The stabilizing field is drawing heat from the living organisms nearby, and she must decide whether to expand the perimeter or let the entropy consume the idling bystanders. The horizon is narrowing, the sky above the parking lot twisting into a funnel that draws the clouds down to street level. WYRMSCALE glances at her chronometer, noting the mercury-filled dials are spinning in reverse, a sign that the temporal window is closing faster than calculated. If she does not activate the next phase of the solvent's deployment within 2 minutes, the entire block will be folded into the void, taking the bystanders and her research into a permanent, unreachable state of suspension. A heavy, metallic thrum resonates through the ground, signaling the arrival of an external force, a black-clad recovery team emerging from the fog that the tower has generated. They are not here to help. They are the architects of the containment, and they do not intend to let WYRMSCALE finish her work. They move with a synchronization that suggests they are tethered to the same anomalous source that is currently erasing the parking lot, their presence a direct challenge to her solitary calculations. While the recovery team advances, WYRMSCALE kicks aside a layer of loose gravel to reveal a buried steel canister marked with the insignia of the syndicate she once served. She pries it open to find a physical ledger, its pages etched with the exact frequency codes required to neutralize the tower's anchoring effect. This is the evidence she needed, a record of the staged incursions, proving that the atmospheric collapse was a deliberate experiment conducted by the very people now closing in on her position. She scans the ledger, matching the handwritten notations to the atmospheric fluctuations currently tearing the clouds apart. The calculations are precise, detailing the exact barometric shift needed to trigger the tower's collapse without causing a city-wide cascade. The data is genuine, a heavy, tangible burden of proof that validates every suspicion she held during the previous incursions. With this record in hand, the nature of the crisis shifts from an uncontrollable disaster to a traceable crime that she now has the leverage to expose. The recovery team stops, their leader staring directly at the ledger in WYRMSCALE hand, his silence confirming that they are aware of her discovery. He knows that she possesses the blueprint for the entire operation, a realization that leaves them at a temporary stalemate amidst the encroaching void. Others have clearly seen the ledger before, yet WYRMSCALE is the only one who has managed to extract it from the epicenter. The scale of the secret is massive, but for the first time, the truth is hers. The air near the bus stop grows heavy, distorted by the silent, towering wall of water suspended in the air behind the shelter. WYRMSCALE stands motionless, her breath visible in the biting chill drawn by the stabilizing field. Across the cracked asphalt, the figures emerge from the haze, their movements fluid and detached. They do not run or shout. They recognize the weight of the data she carries, the silence between them echoing the immense, unnatural pressure of the liquid barrier looming overhead. She taps the interface at her wrist, projecting the ledger's contents into the freezing air between them. The holographic blueprints flicker, mapping the precise points where they triggered the atmospheric collapse. It is a sterile confession of engineering and malice, exposed in the cold light. They stop, watching the architecture of their crime drift in the wind. WYRMSCALE does not offer a challenge. She simply presents the architecture of their failure, waiting to see if they possess the capacity to understand the collapse. One of them steps forward, his hand hovering near a hidden activation sequence designed to purge the sector. He assumes that by erasing her, the ledger remains an orphan, a ghost of a secret that can be rewritten. WYRMSCALE adjusts the field's harmonic frequency, feeding the ambient cold back into their own containment units. She is no longer just observing the phenomenon. She is becoming a part of the containment, turning their tactical advantage into a tether that anchors them to their own miscalculation. The atmospheric pressure shifts, the wall of water behind the bus stop beginning to ripple as the stabilization field falters. The men are no longer in control. The void they orchestrated is reclaiming its own, bleeding back into the reality they attempted to manipulate. As their equipment begins to frost over and lock, the very energy they channeled to consume the block is pulled inward, leaving them grounded and vulnerable amidst the shifting physics of the collapsing site. The consequence is purely mechanical, devoid of mercy. To stabilize the collapse, WYRMSCALE must surrender the thermal safety of her own perimeter. She watches as the warmth leaches from her limbs, her vision blurring as the frost crawls up her gloves. The effort to hold the gateway open requires a biological toll she had not accounted for, a debt paid in the numbing of her nerves. She ignores the encroaching shadows, focusing only on the structural integrity of the seal, knowing that her own physical degradation is the final price for the truth. The wall of water shatters, not into a deluge, but into a fine, crystalline mist that settles over the street. The men stand trapped within the remnants of their failed experiment, their technology fused and inert. They have not been defeated by combat, but by the gravity of their own design. Now unmasked and rendered impotent, WYRMSCALE exhales, the breath leaving her lungs in a long, ragged plume. The ledger remains secure, a heavy anchor in a world that has finally ceased its artificial shaking. The morning arrives with a dull, gray light. WYRMSCALE sits on the wet bench of the bus stop, cleaning the grit of the encounter from her gear with a steady, mechanical focus. The silence of the city is absolute, stripped of the hum of machines. She picks up a discarded schedule, the paper damp and useless. It is a small, mundane task, but her hands tremble with a lingering, hollow exhaustion. Some connections to the life she knew before have frayed beyond any hope of repair. The street is quiet, save for the sound of distant, retreating sirens. WYRMSCALE packs her tools, leaving behind the small, charred patch of ground where the field had drawn its heat. She realizes that while the truth is now documented, the cost has left her permanently detached from the rhythm of the city. She stands and walks away, leaving the bus stop behind. The world is physically intact, yet the clarity she sought has revealed a void that will never be filled by familiar things. WYRMSCALE finds her sister waiting in the sterile light of an atrium, holding 2 plastic cups of cooling tea. There is no warmth in the reunion, only the heavy silence of things left unsaid during the long months of her absence. They speak of mundane logistics, the scheduling of doctors and the repair of a roof, but the distance between them has calcified into something permanent. She watches her sister's hands tremble and realizes that the intimacy they once shared is a language she has forgotten. The parking lot is nearly empty at 3 in the morning, save for the rhythmic hum of the ventilation fans. WYRMSCALE stands at the perimeter, watching as it tower a jagged, impossible structure of iron and light slowly vanishes into the heavy, low-hanging clouds above. It is a quiet erasure, the pinnacle of the spire dissolving atom by atom into the atmosphere. She checks her watch, notes the time, and logs the displacement. This is her new shift, a solitary observation of a dissolving reality. She clears the final ledger of the tactical unit, burning the digital keys that once tethered her to their failed containment protocols. It is a methodical, unceremonious task performed on a rusted terminal in the basement of a condemned office block. As the files purge, the last echoes of the antagonist's influence evaporate from the server logs. She does not look back at the screen. The closure is absolute, a quiet severance of the burden she had carried for so long in the dark. The morning mist clings to the pavement where the tower once loomed, leaving only a faint, circular depression in the asphalt. WYRMSCALE walks across the empty space, her boots scuffing against the cracked surface where the atmospheric pressure had once been immense. The air here tastes of ozone and static, a lingering ghost of the phenomenon that had defined her existence. She stops at the center, tilts her head toward the gray sky, and waits for a change that never arrives, standing still. The clouds shift, revealing a sliver of pale, indifferent sun that illuminates the vast, featureless horizon. There is no grand revelation waiting in the aftermath, only the slow, steady reclamation of the landscape by the weather and the passage of hours. WYRMSCALE turns away from the spot, her shadows stretching long and thin across the concrete. She walks toward the street, her footsteps steady and deliberate, moving into the remainder of a day that holds no further mysteries to resolve or storms to bind.